Hey, what's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here, and this is the next installment into the Pink Floyd discography, and for this one, I'm going to be doing the album review on the band's next album entitled More. Now, this is the third soundtrack album, I should say, because More is particularly made as a soundtrack to the movie of the same name, and it is the follow-up to, in my opinion, a really average album, A Saucer Full of Secrets. So this is a big change between the band in terms of the lineup. So this is the first time of the band that we all know and love to feature David Gilmour, Nick Mason, Roger Waters, and Richard Wright. And this is the first album without Syd Barrett, who left the band during the recording of A Saucer Full of Secrets. So this album came out 1 year after A Saucer Full of Secrets, which is 1969. And it has 13 tracks and it's 45 minutes long. Now, what do I think of this soundtrack, More? This album, to me, is pretty much like the same type of feeling as I got from what I think of A Saucer Full of Secrets. It is a good album, and at the same time, this is quite a very different album than Saucer Full of Secrets and Piper at the Gate of Dawn. Well, A Saucer Full of Secrets is a very different album, but More is much more of an experimental sounding album than Saucer Full of Secrets, and I think this album is decent for what it is. Half of the album does have vocals on the tracks, and the other half on this album are a couple of instrumentals. So I think More is still a very mediocre and above average album like A Saucer Full of Secrets. Production wise of this album is not bad. I mean, the vocals do sound quite good, and vocals mainly from Roger Waters did sing at a quieter, cleaner, great tone, and also this is the first album to have David Gilmour on lead vocals on some tracks, including songs like the Nile Song and Ibiza Bar, and he sings quite well on a couple of these tracks. And the music on this album is mainly more of a psychedelic folk type of album, because the first two albums, Piper at the Gates of Dawn and Saucer Full of Secrets, those two albums are mainly more psychedelic rock and experimental type sounding. This album does have experimentation in terms of sound, and they do sound different from each other. There are a couple of songs on here that contains a lot of these really quite fancy and bright folk songs like Crying Song and Green is the Colour, and the acoustic guitar sound is really wonderful on here. I'm very surprised by it. And there are some songs that are very much more like hard rock type sounding than a psychedelic song, especially the Nile Song, which is more of the heavier songs on this album, and Ibiza Bar. I mean, there are more hard rock sounding songs, and they're really quite good songs. I think the Nile Song is the best track on this album. It does have an interesting dirge, and it does have strong delivery, and as the song progresses, it changes key and it gets higher, and I think it works tremendously. And I think that's a really good song on this album. There are some fillers on this album which disappointed me quite a bit. There were some songs on this album like a few instrumentals that the band could have been done much more better with something much like more atmospheric and quite dynamic. And there are some instrumentals on this album that are a bit filler. For examples, like one of the instrumentals, like a Spanish piece, and Quicksilver is the longest track on this album, and it does start quite good with the quite a doomy type of sound with the cymbals, and then there's the synthesizer sounds, and it kind of drags on a bit, and I think it's more of an improvisational piece than a structured type of piece. Well, that's just what I think. Other instrumentals I do like. The main theme, it does have some smooth delivery, and the dramatic theme is quite upbeat, of a bright type sound. Up the Khyber somehow really reminds me of the Mothers of Invention, and I do love the Mothers of Invention, one of my favourite bands of all time, with Frank Zappa, and it just instantly reminds me of Mothers of Invention for some weird reason. Overall, to me, as an album, all the way through, it's just not a really strong Pink Floyd album, but it is what it is. I mean, some people really don't like this album, some people like it, so I don't know what you guys think of this album, so let me know what you guys think of More by Pink Floyd in the comments. It does have some decent and good tracks, but on some songs, mainly some instrumentals, can be a bit of a lackluster kind of feeling, and it just doesn't go anywhere. So that's just pretty much all I've got to say about More by Pink Floyd. I mean, that's just how I express on this soundtrack. And for the next review, I'm going to be going on to the double album, Ummagumma. So as for an album rating, I would give More by Pink Floyd a 7 out of 10. Pretty much like the same score as Saucer Full of Secrets. It's an above average album, but it just doesn't, grow up like massively to become a really good Pink Floyd album. It's good, but I think it's just a bit lacklustre, weak at some parts. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more reviews on Pink Floyd in the future and other reviews on other albums in the near future.